Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick, Cornett, Kent Meyers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues. And we bring in a young man today. This is his third trip. And gosh, I bet they've all been in the last year or so.
Well, it may have been 3 straight shows. I'm not sure. Yeah, we're going to have Travis Roach join us again. Dr. Roach, head of the economics department at University of Central Oklahoma. Every time we get something economic in nature, we call on Travis to come straighten us out. And I think this is going to be interesting because we're going to be talking about the price of gasoline and what causes it to move up and down and what should we expect.
Because it seems like it's really high. But is it, we know a dollar amount it's higher than it used to be a generation ago, but we didn't make as much money a generation ago. So how does all that work? Travis is going to straighten all that out. It's coming up next on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy. On the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for. Equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Well, as we indicated, our guest is once again Dr. Travis Roach from the University of Central Oklahoma, Ph.D. economist. And every time we get some idea about we'd like to do a show about what's going on in the economic world, well, Travis is our first choice, and thank goodness he was available for today. We want to talk about today the price of gasoline, and we call it the roller coaster price, going up and down, and see what's involved with that. But let's talk about Travis a little bit personally. He did his undergraduate work at the University of North Texas, got his Ph.D. in economics at Texas Tech. He is frankly a very prolific writer, lecturer, and teacher on economic topics. He's written and studied and taught economics at the University of Central Oklahoma now for a number of years, and is head of the economics department. Travis, welcome back.
Thank you again for having me. I think my seat is still warm. So.
Well, things come up and your name comes up. It's like we got to get Travis on to talk about that.
Yeah, energy prices and energy in general is one of those things that impacts every day we have.
And inflation too.
And this has both of them in there, right? So gas prices, it will be either $1 more or $1 less from the day we're taping this. I just passed a sign that said $3.61, and down where I live in OKC, it was $3.73. And so there's just so many fascinating fundamentals that go into the pricing of gasoline. But I noticed the quote we had coming up is that is it the president who decides gas prices? And depending on which side of the aisle you're on, yes, it is, as if the president has a knob.
Well, they want to blame somebody, Trev.
Right.
So if you want to point the finger in a different direction, feel free. But people want to blame somebody when the price of gas goes up.
Sure.
They just don't want to think that it might just be normal market capitalistic situations.
Supply and demand.
Well, there you go.
And it is that simple, and especially on a commodity like retail gasoline, because now I'm not a car enthusiast, and that might come across as we're talking today, but where I buy my gasoline, I don't care much for. I will pick out the station that is the cheapest. So retail gasoline is highly competitive. We have stations that monitor prices for everyone within a mile, everyone within 3 miles, everyone within 5 miles. But then you also have to think about if you're pricing your gasoline at a station in Oklahoma City, you're also contending with the prices, say, in Edmond. If someone works in Oklahoma City but lives in Edmond, they could purchase from either of you. So it's so competitive. And you're thinking about what your competitors are doing, and they're thinking about what you're doing. And so we really see some very fundamentally interesting dynamics happen here.
Well, the example that always tickles me is I've had a student in my antitrust classes in the past that has, they nearly always have one a year that brings it up, that they know that the retailers are fixing price because all you have to do is look at the signs. On one corner, it's $3.50. Right across the street, it's $3.50. See, they're charging the same price. They must be fixing price. And I try to talk them out of that. Now, they may be fixing price, but they don't have to be based upon that circumstance.
Well, I appreciate you talking them out of it, because they most certainly aren't. And that's a conversation that boiled over in Washington, even saying that we have these anti-competitive gas companies, and it's frankly just not true. So the model, there's a couple different ways of phrasing it, but the one that sticks out, and I think even CNN ran a headline with it, is talking about what's called rockets and feathers. The idea that prices can increase like a rocket and then fall like feathers. So we might see the immediate after effect of, say, a price shock, like what happened after the Russia-Ukraine war started. Prices increased dramatically. But now that they've come back down at the wholesale level, it's been slower to catch in to the retail level.
Mm-hmm. Retailers don't want to lose that extra bump that they hadn't.
Especially if they purchased it back when it was at a high price. So all the giant tank underneath their station, that's full of expensive gas that they still need to pay. Now, as soon as they can pass on a price decrease, they tend to. So it's funny, Tulsa and Oklahoma City actually have very different retail gasoline markets.
How so?
So in Tulsa, you have this phenomenon called price cycling. So if you look at a chart of Tulsa, it looks like a little sawtooth where prices jump up and then they all compete back down, and then they jump up again and all compete back down. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing.
Really?
And so you had this interesting phenomenon.
Why is that?
Well, because one firm in the market, or maybe a brand in the market, will increase their price, but then everyone follows, but just 1 or 2 cents below, and they compete back down, sometimes below wholesale prices.
I'll just throw out a point that may be completely erroneous, but Quick Trip has a strong presence in the Tulsa market and basically no impact on the Oklahoma City market. I mean, could something like that be a factor?
We don't really know what is causing them. So price cycles happen in the Midwest in general. They don't really happen in Texas that much. They happen in some cities in California. Well, and in Oklahoma City, for instance, we don't have price cycling. We tend to have kind of wholesale cost plus a fixed fee. And so we don't see the same competitive behavior in Oklahoma City as we do in Tulsa. And so this price pass-through, when prices started falling, it happened a lot faster in Tulsa than OKC.
If you want lower price gas, I don't know that it helps to be near the oil field, but it might help to be near the refinery. What else would you want to be near? The pipeline? What aspect of the supply chain would you want to be closest to have the lowest gas price?
Pipelining, refining, these all contribute, but it really is a small margin. I read recently it takes about $2 to ship a barrel of oil from the United States to Europe. So we're imagining that's a very long distance. So even interior United States, being closer to refining, it might help, but it's by pennies, if any.
Yeah, and you can't drink the water.
That's right.
It shouldn't matter that much, is what you're saying.
It shouldn't, and if anything, it's a thing that doesn't change over time.
Well, obviously, different states have different levels of a gas tax. Is that the biggest factor in determining an ultimate price to the consumer?
That is a major factor. In fact, that's one of those fun things that energy economists are kind of nerding out over right now, is that in Maryland, they dropped their gas tax. And that reduced the gas station price by about 36 cents overnight. And what you're seeing is in Delaware and in Pennsylvania, prices haven't adjusted because they didn't change their gas tax. And you have people who live in Washington, D.C. driving over to Maryland to take advantage of 36 cents less per gallon. And they've seen a big bump in demand.
And when states raise their gas tax, are they doing it to incentivize people to drive less or drive differently or move through different transportation methods? Is that generally the reason given when gas taxes go up or down? Or are they just trying to create revenue for themselves?
Probably both is the honest answer, is that the idea would be to incentivize cleaner consumption or less consumption and to pay for necessities that we all use, like roads and bridges. So using a gasoline tax, you're able to tax the people that are consuming those goods. So if roads are falling apart, you might expect that a gas tax would help pick up that portion. Whether or not that's used to help state finances so that other taxes may be decreased, the dismal scientist in me says maybe that's happening, where we're putting a lot of tax burden onto people who buy gas and away from people who earn a higher income.
Well, we're about to get to a break here, but to whet the interest of the viewers even more, what do you predict the gas price will be 30 days from now?
Oh, man. So you either give a number or you give a date, but you never give both.
You certainly don't give your name.
It will be different than what it is now, most likely. However, maybe what we'll talk about in the next segment is how we think about these gas prices. Because while they look high, you're right, whether or not they're hitting our pocketbook the same way they were this high last time, that's a different question.
I have a graphic, and I wanted to get to it in this segment, but why don't we wait till the next segment?
That's
then?
good.
And it shows the relative change in salaries and income, and what percentage of their dollar is spent on gasoline a year ago, 30 years ago, and now. So we'll be right back with more. You're watching Travis Roach, and he's on The Verdict.
The Vet Hero office at the University of Central Oklahoma, it is a one-stop shop for veterans when they're trying to get their education.
I call it my encore job. I get to take care of veterans. We help them transition. I was that guy that transitioned after 24 years, and in the end, GI Bill is a benefit that those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine earned. It was the thing that made us the greatest country in the world coming out of World War II, and it will continue to do the same thing for this future generation of service members.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank #2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick, Cornett, Kent Meyers, and our guest is Travis Roach. He's an economist from UCO. Let's go straight to this graphic that shows relatively how the price of gasoline has an effect on the consumer through the years. So what are we looking at here? 1960 on the far left. And so just tell us what this graph's about.
So economists, we can always look at numbers, and we want to do our best to explain them in a way that makes real sense. I'm going to emphasize the word real there. So you might have heard, we've talked about inflation, and we translate things like GDP or incomes into real terms to take account of inflation. And so ways to do that is to think about, how much effort you have to put in to purchase a gallon of gas. But we also have to take account of the fact that society's improved over time. The average distance that a car can drive now is a lot further than it could in the 1960s. Even think back to 2008. We didn't have the Priuses or the other long-range vehicles that we had back then. So just technological advancement alone can help eat away at some of this cost that we might see. So like, imagine an iPhone in 2008. It's vastly different than the iPhone you might have in your pocket right now. Same goes through with vehicles. So what this chart is showing is how much of your expenditure was spent to buy gasoline. And you can see it peaked kind of in 2008. That, if we're thinking about when gas was the most expensive, it was back then.
Yeah, but I mean, but your graph shows that in 1980, and gas was like $1 a gallon then, but look, it was 6% of your income.
Right, 6% of your income, and your expenditure share is going toward that. And that was when we had crises with Mideast oil and gas supply. This is when you had lines out the door. And so while it might have looked like on the board about $1, that felt like what $3.70 now does. But I can tell you, having been a high schooler in 2005 graduating and having only busboy tips, $3.70 back then felt a lot different to me than it does today.
All right, let me throw a wrinkle in our conversation here. What about the electric vehicle? What does that do to all of this?
So the electric vehicle, I think we've just entered the next generation of its ability to get you a long distance, and the rapid the rapid changeover, I guess I should say, in the ability to charge. These are popping up in cities, at businesses. There are some folks downtown, right around Katz's, Midtown. They installed that as a way to help bring in business. So this is a way to differentiate yourself if you're not even someone who sells electricity. And then also just technological advancement. The lithium-ion battery is now 97% less expensive than it was just a decade or so ago. It's just caught up. And so as with a lot of these things, change happens slowly at first and then all of a sudden. So EVs have become cost competitive on their own. You have even, a used Chevy Bolt, even right now, that's much, we've got used car price inflation. It's still under $20,000 and will take you 200 miles. It takes you $6 to fill up.
Well, from an economist standpoint, though, you can look at the price of gasoline, you have a data point. With electricity running a car through a battery, it's got to be different to calculate.
Right.
I'm assuming you can figure it out, but it's got to be different. So how is it different?
So, okay, the easiest way I've come to think about it.
It's not free.
It's not free, no.
Yeah.
But it's a lot less expensive. So in Oklahoma, we have historically low prices compared to the rest of the United States. It takes about, let's say, 15 cents per kilowatt hour to get a kilowatt hour of electricity. That kilowatt hour will take you 4 to 6 miles. Okay, that's how we're thinking on the EV side. Right now, gasoline, I told you, it was $3.60. Well, how many kilowatts could I buy with that? Oh, it's at least, 6, 12, 18. That's already going to take me about 70, 80, 100 miles. So 1 gallon of gas or spending the equivalent on electricity, I'm getting much further distance for the same price.
So the expense is on the capital side. I mean, electric vehicles tend to cost more than combustion.
Tend to cost more up front, but you also have to, you're not having to get an oil change. A lot of them use this process called regenerative braking, so where if you let off the gas, it starts pulling back automatically, so you don't even have to pay for a brake job. These cars are very advanced, and they're helping to help consumers.
What do you expect to happen to the price of these electric vehicles in the future? Do you expect them to, consistent with inflation and all?
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of entry. We've already seen Ford and some of these historic companies that you may not have thought would ever enter this industry. That's their entire strategic profile going forward. Mary Barra at GM, she moved GM to all electric by, I forget the date, it's a couple years from now. But that's a historic automaker that is moving their entire supply chain or entire production space to electric, which will have the effect of bringing these prices down. So while you might have some very high-end cars that are expensive, you'll also have the consumer class that is much less expensive.
How will gas stations make it? I mean, are they going to have to charge for the opportunity to be there and fill? I was going to say fill up or fuel up.
Yeah.
I don't know what you call it. Charge up, I guess. But how is that model likely to change?
I think you'll see a transition into trying to bring the customer in the store and stay in the store. Because
in-store sales.
In-store sales, because even a Tesla supercharger, it goes very fast. 10 minutes to go 250 miles, but it's still 10 minutes. At a gas station to fill up, it's 2 minutes, right?
Well, I was in Northern California a couple of weeks ago, and at a Target store, there was 20 bays for people to charge up their electric vehicle. 20 of them. And I guess the idea was Target was giving up that space because they knew people would go shop because it takes so long to charge their car.
That's the on-cue model.
Yeah.
Right now, if I'm Sonic, I'm very seriously considering adding electric charging at my stations because their whole business model is the drive up. Well, why don't you drive up, stay and eat? And you might stay for dessert if you're getting just a few extra miles out of your charger.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's change the subject, if we can. Let's talk about Russia. A little bit. I'm not talking about the war. Well, I am, but I'm not talking about strategic decisions in wartime. What effect has Russia's activities had on the price of gasoline in the United States?
In the immediate term, it brought prices right up, which should be expected. We had a big decrease in supply. You have majors like Exxon, who their Russian operations were about 2% of their entire portfolio. They've left Russia since this war started. You also have a major consumer in the continent of Europe who have tried to distance themselves as best as they can from consuming Russian oil and gas. And what that's done is brought in a new market for American producers. So you see this big shipment, this change in LNG, liquefied natural gas, being shipped into Europe to help satiate that demand. So we're in a very moving, changing equilibrium status right now. But just to put in a personal point of view, anytime I see gas that's $3.70, it does feel expensive. But if that helps me not fund or contribute to a wartime effort, I'll pay the extra 50 cents or whatever that is due to the war.
Mm-hmm. So we're running out of time in this show. What do you want our viewers to take away from that? What do you have to offer as an economist who studies consumer behavior and gasoline prices?
One of the best cures to high prices is high prices. So we've heard a lot of conversation about capital not going back into the oil field. Mm-hmm. I'll believe it when I see it. When prices are in the 100s, that tends to draw investment dollars. That will bring out new rigs, and that will have the effect of bringing prices back down. We see pump prices going up. What that's done is people have consumed less, they've driven less, and that's helped them buffer in this time of high prices. High prices are just high prices. They hurt our pocketbook, but they do go away.
Mm-hmm. What other are there factors involved in the price of gasoline that most people don't even think about?
Yes. And some of them are the geopolitical concerns like we were talking about before. The Nord Stream 1 was the first pipeline that went from Russia into Europe. What they did was they went around Ukraine because the concern was when there was a supply crunch a few years ago that Ukraine had first dibs at any of that supply coming through. So Europe, to secure their own supply, they went around Ukraine. And so Nord Stream 2, which has just been tabled, was supposed to do the same thing. So Germany and some of these other countries, they had assumed that they had a very secure source of natural gas and oil, and they bet a lot on it. And even U.S. and domestic producers here, they've also been working in these fields over mm-hmm. there. They put a large investment and bet into the future of Russia, and this, with every investment comes some risk. And we've seen a big changeover because of this war, and that filtered into our prices almost immediately.
Yeah. So a lot of times it may be geopolitical more than it's internal.
Absolutely, because if a price can be commanded in Europe, then it will draw supply into Europe and away from the United States. So even if prices could be low here, as long as they're high somewhere else, that will bring up prices. So back kind of to the top of our show, does the president control the price of gasoline? No. Wherever the highest price of gas is in the world, that's what controls the price of gasoline, because that's what's going to incentivize all the supply coming toward it.
And that'll have to be the final word in this show. Travis, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, don't go too far. We'll have you back.
Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
It used to be okay in hospitals. It used to be okay in movie theaters. It was okay in classrooms, restaurants, and airplanes. But thanks to a greater understanding of the dangers, that's not okay anymore. So now that we know secondhand smoke causes lifelong health problems, why is it still okay to smoke with children in the car? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's get serious about protecting kids. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we've tried to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
We're back on The Verdict. I'm still looking at Travis's chart here that shows the percentage of consumer dollars that go toward gas. And it is amazing how it's gone up and down, and it seems high now, but it's really not.
Well, it really isn't, comparatively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at this. Yeah, on the far left side of your screen there, that's 1960, gasoline was about 5% of consumer spending. And then in 1980, it jumped to 6%, and today, at the far right of your screen, is 2.5%. And as Travis reminded us, cars are a lot more efficient today. They go a lot further on a gallon of gas than they did back then. And so there's just a lot of factors, but we think, man, gasoline prices are up, it's just killing me. But it's actually, half what it was in 1960.
Yeah. In answering the question, who's responsible for the price of gasoline being so high? All of us.
Yeah.
The marketplace.
Yeah, or the person in the political party that you don't belong to. That's usually who you can blame. If you want to get a hold of Travis, he's at uco.edu. That's his website, uco.edu, and then find your way to the economics department. And we've got a website, theverdict.tv. We'll see you next week.